But for those of you who don't, WPA's work in people analytics is leading organizational intelligence about a company's unique work, its people, its behaviors, and today we're going to be talking extensively about its culture. WPA is a cloud-based toolbox that provides leaders with clarity and evidence for decision-making about all kinds of things, from optimizing their human capital to closing the strategy execution gap, employee engagement, higher levels of productivity. There's really nothing else like it. We're excited that all of you have joined us and we get to tell you a little bit more about it. WPA North America holds this series of short and informative webinars monthly on topics of interest and how work and people analytics provides solutions. Be sure to sign up for the entire series. Our next presentation will be next month, Thursday, October 19th, same time, 10 o'clock Central. Attendees will be in listen-only mode for the webinar. Please be sure to submit any questions you might have. We look forward to those. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available online. And with that said, I'm Tom West. I work with WPA conducting our training and certification programs as well as supporting North American partnerships. Stephen Smith, also with Team WPA, is on the presentation as well. Maybe fielding submitted questions. Stephen is an industrial organizational psychologist with a Fortune 500 HR and analytics background. And I'm happy to work with and introduce Kevin Schlater, who's president of WPA North America and part of the global WPA team. Kevin has more than 25 years experience in corporate financial performance, organizational leadership, and strategic planning. So with that said, Kevin, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Tom, and good morning to everybody, or good afternoon if you happen to be somewhere else in the world. This has been terrific this year, doing all of these webinars and sharing this information, and sometimes they build on each other a little bit, but in about the time that you can watch your favorite sitcom, we can share some valuable information and insights. And my bent is always from a financial perspective, because that's my background and that's where I came from. But in today's knowledge workforces, people make the difference. So that's what we're going to focus on, and that's what we do focus on at WPA. So as we get into our presentation today, we're going to talk about culture, and that's really the main focus, but we're going to tie a couple of things together. And the first slide that we show here really is outline system thinking in any organization. There's inputs, and then there's the orange things which make the wheels turn and progress happen and productivity in the organization, and there's outputs. And the value of that output really is contingent upon certainly the input, the types of people we have that we bring into and allow to play in our sandbox. But then the orange ones, how well we support them and how well we help them lead and how we change their behaviors. And today, we're going to talk about those two main wheels, and especially the one in the upper left-hand corner, the context or the culture of your organizations. We've built in the past 3 or 4 or 5 months, we've talked about the work activities and different behaviors and value networks within the organization, and I encourage you to go back to our YouTube channel or website to review those. Then we'll build on them, but we're going to come back to this exact slide a little bit later when I show some examples of how culture can drive the right or the incorrect work activities and work behaviors in the organization, and what that means in terms of dollars and money in your organization. So the one we're going to talk about today and focus on is culture, and it's the straw that really stirs the drink of the organization, and we'll show you how culture dictates how people act, how they behave, how they treat your clients, how they decide to innovate or produce within your organization.
I think
probably
Kevin,
go through. Go ahead, Tom.
Sorry for the interruption. We're going to launch a quick poll question just to keep everybody engaged.
Yeah, thank you.
Here, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and launch that now. Very simple, but we're curious. Does your organization currently measure its culture in some way, shape, or form? Just a yes or no question. I'll leave that open for just a couple minutes here, and we'll keep moving here. So interesting, most people have responded already, Kevin, and we'll be closing this here pretty quick, but it looks like 60-40 split. 60% say no, our organization is not currently measuring its culture. Only 40% say yes. So it is valuable last. I'm going to go ahead and close that here momentarily. It's bumped up even slightly more, Kevin. So 70+% of respondents say no, our organization is not measuring its culture.
Well, that's interesting. And Tom, you know that before we started this program, and as we worked on it over the past couple of weeks, we talked a little bit about that question, and your thought was, hey, people are doing this by and large, and it's interesting to see that they aren't, and that was a little bit of my tendency. Culture is so important, and on the slide here, in a couple of following slides, we just kind of want to cement the point that understanding culture and getting culture right makes a difference in terms of profit, in terms of revenue generation, and in terms of long-term sustainable value. And it is top of mind for CEOs and organizations. It's at the very top of the list. And at WPA, we don't always like the word engagement as much as we love the word involvement, getting everyone involved in talking about how to improve work and enhance performance. But culture is clearly up there. And the best-in-class organizations know that culture matters. If everybody knows who Peter Drucker is, he's kind of the godfather of modern management and that type of thinking. And he's an expert who really said culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think, while that's certainly maybe a smart thing to say, and people debate whether or not that's true or not, what he's really saying is this, and it's pertinent today. Here's what this really means. Culture makes things go faster. Culture increases our agility and our responsiveness to clients and our responsiveness to a new idea that comes up in our organization and our ability to respond to it. Culture creates a knowledge of the values and purpose of the organization, and it removes hierarchy. And very specifically, what it means is this: if the culture is right, we don't need people to tell other people, thus hierarchy, in an organization what to do. They inherently know what to do. And now think of that against your competitor down the street. That's real speed and agility, and that's really what wins. And that's what he's saying with that quote.
And Kevin, if you don't mind me interjecting, so culture is really the embodiment of the guiding principles and values that are shared within an organization, and it's manifested in worker behaviors, what people say and what they do and how they say and do things. Wouldn't you agree?
I would absolutely agree, and probably the one on the phone who's probably not going to speak too much today is Stephen Smith, and Stephen Smith, with his industrial organizational psych background and all of his experience at Fortune 500s, knows that to be very, very true, and that's the embodiment. So we're going to talk a little bit about culture here and what that means. In short, and this has been proven time and time again, that organizations that have an aligned culture, in other words, and we'll show this later, our current culture is similar to the needed culture. In other words, we overlap very well. Our culture is spot on. They have exponential financial performance and long-term effectiveness in those organizations. So when we talk about culture, Tom, to your point and what you were talking about, how to look at it, there's really two quadrants, or two dimensions, vertical and horizontal here, which we look at it. And the first one is this. On the lower half of this chart, we'll see what stability and control means to an organization. And so those are organizations that tend to have hierarchy and systems in place. And on the top is, no, let's allow some individuality and flexibility out in the marketplace or within our organization. And then on the horizontal axis, we see internal maintenance versus external positioning. And what this specifically means in internal maintenance is, let's look at ourselves. Let's kind of correct some of our systems within, our people within the organization. And every organization kind of goes through this. And then, or do we want to balance toward external positioning in the marketplace? Should we pay close attention to our clients and what they're doing so that we can be responsive to them? It's really important what it says on the bottom, that one quadrant here is not better or worse. Everyone in their organization's life cycle goes through these various areas. And what that really leaves us are four quadrants. And the first one in the lower left-hand corner is kind of a hierarchical or a control-based system where we're a little more formal and structured in what we do, and that would be a marching band, or perhaps the military would be a good example of that. In the upper left-hand corner, again, we're looking at internal maintenance. Those are teams that are working together. So a project team, for example, a construction company that's building big buildings and relies on projects and systems to get things done, may have a tendency to be in this quadrant or at a certain point in their life cycle. In the upper right-hand corner is innovation or creativity. So that's looking at the external world, but it's allowing a lot of dynamic individuality and flexibility in the organization to be responsive to what is happening and what might be the best to solve problems. And in the lower right-hand corner would be that external positioning where there's stability and control. It means an organization has answers. These could be experts who have answers in terms of business advisory or tax advice or those types of things, or even a technology that is an answer. Microsoft, to a certain extent, is very market-driven when they're trying to push and sell, Office 365. It's an answer. Let's now sell this to everyone. Those orientations are very important, and you can see here, and I'm going to draw this picture right here in front of you so that you can see what we're going to get into very specific data and material now. When we visualize culture in an organization, and with the model that you're going to see coming up here and the organizations we're going to share and their data, we're looking at current state and future state as well. And this is important to remember and to think of and to understand. And that pinkish hue or that orangish hue is the current state of the organization. And you can see when we balance in those quadrants that every organization is going to have some sort of balance in there. We overlap that with future state or what we call desired state. In other words, and here's the difference between these two. The current state is who we are right now culturally. The future state says who do we need to be if we are to become and achieve our greatest aspirations and the greatest vision and purpose of our organization. So that's important to know those.
A couple of quick comments, Kevin, if you don't mind. First, WPA's Work in People Analytics really uses a generally accepted model that's very popular about how to depict and how to look at organizational culture. These 4 quadrants we give our own names to, but the dimensions that they're based on are very common and generally accepted, I would just say. And then secondly, as you were just describing, we're asking respondents on the front line about their work, and we're also asking them about their read on the characteristics of the current organizational culture, how that affects their work, and what is necessary in the near future in order for them to do their best work. Correct?
That's correct. Yep, that's absolutely correct. Thank you. So now we're going to go into a case and we're going to see kind of the cultural overlays of a particular organization, and this is a business advisory firm we serve, and this is one of their offices, one of their office locations domestically. And you can see what their key strategies are, and this is important to know because when we talk about alignment or misalignment, this is going to be very important to know. They're an organization that wants to move away from their typical business advisory services to more innovative types of services. In order to do that, they know that this is what needs to happen. They need to get close to clients. So they're no longer going to just respond and push out paper and solutions for them. They have to listen to them and what their problems are. Then they have to be able to communicate those in and around the office and with their clients so that they can bubble up ideas and issues and identify those emerging risks and opportunities. So for this particular case, here's exactly what their culture profile looks like, current and future. And if you can see with that orange or pinkish hue again, that's current state. And if you look at the balance just on the pink, you notice that it's balanced much more toward that bottom quadrant, or the bottom half, excuse me, which is stability and control. And the entire organization is really saying, you know what, if we're going to achieve these things, this vision, these innovative things, we need to really go from stability and control up to this flexibility up at the top. We need to be able to move around and talk and communicate, and perhaps even across different boundaries or hierarchical structures that are in the organization. And it clearly shows that this organization is in line with the strategic plan. They want more communication and innovation. They see it, but they can't get there. Their existing culture, or their pink, is working against them. There's still too much control and market-driven inertia in their organization. Very important for leaders, and especially HR leaders, to understand who they're dealing with. So what are the solutions for this organization? What did we derive for them? Well, number one, and some of these things are very, very simple and they're beautiful. Communicate using visual evidence. In other words, use this information, explain it to leaders, management teams within the organization, and say, look, we all know what our strategic plan is, but we can't get there because we're still too driven by the lower half. Let's move our organization and our people up toward that upper half, and there's different ways to do that. So now let's allow those management teams to contribute and lead to the growth of the organization in terms of innovation and listening to clients and creating new ideas and revenue streams. It might take a little bit of training and coaching on a day-to-day basis, but that's the reason that we have HR managers, HR leaders within organizations, is to identify these things. And in some respects, workplace strategies, in other words, how to kind of co-locate people around an office environment, or how to allow them to interact, and how to allow ideas to bubble up and take hold in the organization, and perhaps organizational adjustments. And Stephen Smith, who's on the call, was really integral in leading these things. And Stephen's very practical, and he says very practical things, and these aren't hard things. These are things that an organization can do, and we love that at WPA. We love things to be quick, usable, and actionable.
Kevin, if you don't mind, just to follow up to what you were showing there a moment, it's pretty common, isn't it? This is what we see when we're performing a scan using work and people analytics in a client organization. Often there's misalignment, and this is a broad stereotype, but most organizations these days probably desire to be in the upper right-hand quadrant, right? More responsive, innovative, creative, adaptable, rather than heavily bureaucratic in order to carry out the competitive strategic objectives that they have, wouldn't you say?
That's true. By and large, I would say that we see that organizations are tending toward that, and that's just kind of where we are as a knowledge workforce economy now. However, we clearly have seen organizations that are pulling back toward greater control and greater market presence in their organizations. They're out of control, and they innovate too much, and there's too much knowledge share. So you'll see it go both ways. And sometimes, Tom, within organizations, different departments have different cultural alignments too, and that's important to know.
A great point. I was just going to follow up by saying that as well, that work and people analytics allows you to look at an organization as a whole, but then also to dissect, slice and dice and look at any team, any demographic, any department, so that some of these solutions that you're outlining here, like training, coaching, communication, those can be laser focused and delivered where they're absolutely needed in the organization, not a shotgun blast.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We're talking about human behavior here. So, it's very complex, but also often things, and Stephen uses this term, it just needs a nudge. And a nudge can be worth millions and millions and millions of dollars to an organization. So after looking at that culture model and that overlap, I'm going to just talk about very swiftly some primary ways to look at that model. Number one, when you're looking at your organization's data, understand the type of culture that currently dominates your organization or your population if it's a department of a large organization. So what's dominant in there? The other way to look at it, another way, is the discrepancies between the current and preferred culture. And as I mentioned, the tighter the overlap of those two polygons are, the more higher performing an organization is. So a goal is to move the culture toward what the organization's leaders want. Now remember, this is data that the people are providing input on what the culture exactly is, but what really matters is what the leaders in that organization want. But knowing what that current culture is critically important, because then you can move them to or away from their desired or preferred culture. Next is the strength of that culture that dominates the organization. Third is then looking at trends of that culture over a period of time. Organizations in their history and their life cycle will go through several iterations. They'll kind of move around that, that culture diagram like a clock. And we need different things at different times. Apple was very innovative at one point, but then they had to get systems and controls in place, and boy, are they market driven now. Everybody has an iPhone. And then last is congruence of those culture profiles on different attributes. And I'm going to show this next screen here. This is that same exact data set that we showed, but now we broke them all down by different age groups, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s plus. And what's very interesting here, and this isn't always common, is every single age group believes the same thing that the entire organization does, which is we need to move more toward teaming, toward knowledge sharing, communication, and innovation in our organization. What a wonderful thing for this organization to see, because at its core what this means and tells the leadership is, wow, we are ready for change. These people want to innovate. Let's help that happen, because this innovation is worth about $2.5 million a year in revenue to this organization, this particular location.
Really good point, Kevin, and great couple of slides to show. As we were pointing out earlier, WPA makes it easy, really, to take these different looks and provide evidence for leaders to make better decisions within the organization.
That's right. We can break it down by any demographic or any attribute. Here's another way of looking at the same thing. This is not the age groups, but these are different departments within that organization. And once again, we can see that everyone's moving in the same direction culturally. So they are picking up what the leadership in that organization is putting down. They agree with the strategic plan and the strategic intent. They are simply saying the culture that we have right now is prohibiting us from doing the things that you want us to do. So if we kind of release those barriers, now we can really get a wellspring of opportunity in the organization. So we can share these slides, and please, reach out to me, and we'll share some things after this with everybody who's on the call. Culture really affects all the actions that HR leaders take. In other words, in each of these quadrants, if you're trying to move an organization toward or away from one of these quadrants, this is what it means. These are the types of actions you take in terms of leadership performance, maybe training and development programs or coaching, and even the built environment and what the environment means in terms of technology or office space, I guess, at its core, and these types of things. And there's a lot here, I understand. But what's really important to understand is that each of these quadrants, if you want to move a team toward them, toward a quadrant or toward a half of the organization, of the model, you need to pay attention to what type of leadership, performance, training environment they need. And they'll go there much more quickly. And of course, we all know speed matters now. Speed wins. One of the people that we really admire at WPA, and that I personally admire also, is Jean Boudreau. And John is really a professor and a research director at the University of Southern California, the Marshall School of Business. And he talks a lot about bridging the gap of talent to maintaining a long-term competitive advantage. And this is that alignment. And he's saying what we showed you just a little bit ago, and we're going to go into another data set here in a little bit. Make sure that the behaviors of leaders are consistent with the strategy. And we can look at behavior culture profiles too, and we do that. And then try and make sure and design your talent strategies to align with that. And that goes in training and development programs and those types of things. And the bottom one is beautiful. You have strategic plans, but you need to be able to execute those. And so make sure that the culture that you want in place, or that you have in place, or that you're moving your teams toward is in line with your strategic intent. So now we're going to talk, the last data set is we're going to talk about the costs of a misaligned culture, near and dear to my heart, because I understand numbers and bottom line and revenue and profit. I'm going to go a little reminder of what we talked about in the very beginning when we're talking about kind of systems thinking in an organization. We talked about culture, and see how that culture wheel is aligned directly to that body of work and work activities. What we're going to see now is on a poor culture or a culture that's misaligned, people are doing the wrong work. They're behaving in the wrong way and the wrong activities. So in this organization, this education nonprofit organization that I showed you, misaligned culture, and I didn't show you that, but what I want to show you is the dollars and cents related to this misalignment. At Work and People Analytics, we study also the work activities of the organization, the behaviors, so what they do to employ their work. Well, here's what this organization does. We meet a lot. To get jobs done, we meet, and we meet in big groups. And we have an awful lot of correspondence, and here's what's fascinating about this, what we found out. We do a lot of this to the tune of 95,000 hours a year. You can see the stats there, but we don't really think it's that important. Now, you talk about a wake-up call for an organization that wants to move their people forward. This is valuable evidence to say, okay, how can we quantify this? Well, it's worth about $3 million a year to us. So when you took that down one step further to the teams looked at that information and said, oh yeah, I'll tell you exactly what's going on. We don't really understand the communication, we don't understand what the purpose of this organization is. We get different ideas, we get different communications. And quite frankly, a lot of people that I am in charge of in my department are disengaged, and we have a lot of attrition. And do I think we can change this? Yes, we can reduce this 20%, 30%, 50%. Some of the managers said, we don't know why we're meeting, so we just call everybody in. You want to talk about exponential waste? So what happened with WPA's evidence is now we have organizational awareness, and now here's the solutions that get deployed in service of the organization. A little training, a little coaching and communication. Again, some of these things are not hard. They're little nudges, as Stephen Smith would say. Work environment strategies are really important. How we co-locate people. That little nudge can make the biggest difference in communication, understanding, and knowledge share. And now, let's do this. Let's reduce those low value behaviors. And because of that, we know that we're going to put back into our organization $2 million extra of actual labor hours and time. And by the way, we don't need more people.
And it's worth pointing out, Kevin, as kind of a bridge between what you're showing now and where you're going. That's one of the things that makes Work and People Analytics very unique and very beneficial, is that we're focused on specific behaviors. This isn't just people's feelings of satisfaction or dissatisfaction, or do they like the food in the lunchroom, is their chair comfortable enough, not just climate surveys, right? We're asking about work.
Tom, being a CFO, being a director of operations in the C-suite in organizations, I'm going to tell you something. Those things don't matter insofar as what we're really concerned about in organizations is productivity and performance. People that are being challenged, that have opportunities in front of them, are the best workers in the world. And so we have to look at real practical things, such as how they're doing their work. And when they see an organization understand how they work and say, here, we can help you do this better with a technology improvement or any of these things, oh my gosh, the culture changes, the light bulbs go on. A little bit about waste. In every instance when we find waste in an organization, I'll provide big time caution to everyone. We don't want to just remove that waste. In almost every instance, we want to transfer that bad behavior into good and productive behavior. That creates a culture of learning, and it creates a culture of productivity and performance in those organizations. And remember, this goes back to the very beginning, execution is a people problem. It's not a strategy problem. Our organizations, and we shared this on a video a few months ago, our organizations are wonderful and leaders are wonderful at saying, here's the vision, let's chart the course, here's the strategy, and they are woefully inefficient and ineffective at actually executing on those strategy. The numbers are staggering. But when you use information like we shared here, you can very quickly understand why a strategy isn't coming into, it isn't becoming a reality or not. So Tom, that's the information we wanted to share today and quantify. I'm curious if there's any questions. We have just about 60 seconds left or less.
We're about right on time, actually, and
Okay.
there were some really questions, but I think you answered them during the course of your presentation, so nice job.
Okay.
I would say we're going to put Kevin's contact information up on the screen right there, and we invite you to connect with us, whether you'd like a copy of the slides or have some further questions. We'd absolutely love to hear from you. Thank you very much for making time today. We want to keep these webinars short and sweet, and we've done that today. You'll see, again, the next presentation in our series is on work dynamic 1 month from now, Thursday the 19th at 10 o'clock, and we hope to see you there. Thanks, everyone, for making time. Thanks, Kevin.
You're very welcome. Thank you.